in the meeting Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael. We don't have Councillor Chalmers in the meeting. We have present Councillor Clark. We have apologies from Councillor Convery and Councillor Handybode substituting. We don't have Councillor Cooper in the meeting at the moment. We have apologies from Councillor Cowan and Councillor Johnson Dempsey is substituting. We have present Councillors Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson Miller. We have apologies from Councillor Frame. We have present Councillors Keat, Kerr. We have apologies from Councillor Lambie and Councillor Corbett is substituting. We have present Councillor Logan. We have apologies from Councillor Loudon. We have apologies from Councillor McCallan. And I'm just going to check if Councillor Horne is substituting. No, he's not in the meeting at the moment. We have present Councillors McClymont, Leslie MacDonald, McLachlan, Nelson, Ray, Razak, Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to item 1, declarations of interest? Can I ask if there are any? Could you indicate now? Not seeing any, so come to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? I don't see any questions, so can we agree those as a correct record? Agreed. We're agreed. Can I come now to item 3? We only have one monitoring item, and this is on an update to funding. It's from Jackie Taylor. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is the usual paper we bring to committee to advise members of any additional funding that has been made from additional sources since the last committee. You can see at section 5 we have additional revenue funding of £12.665 million and additional capital funding of £0.927 million. I take you to the appendices. The detail is provided on page 19 for the revenue funding. We've got funding in relation to employability on the first 2 rows of the table. That includes funding for a tackling poverty coordinator that's continuing from previous years. We have funding from People in Place Local Authority Direct Award. There is revenue and capital funding in relation to this award, totalling £210,000 in total. And we also have Section 27 grant of £7.7 million, and this is the funding we receive for delivering and commissioning justice social work services. Over the page, in Appendix 2, we have additional capital funding. We have active travel funding of £857,000. The full award for the year is £2.3 million. However, £1.4 was already advised to us, so the £857,000 is additional. And then the second line of the table is that the capital element of the People in Place Local Authority Direct funding of £70,000. And we're asking that these additional funds are noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. This is a fair chunk of money we're getting here. I'd like to welcome it, particularly the money that's going to help the unemployability and the child poverty. During this cost of living, we're finding a lot more people living in poverty and children. And I think anything we can do to help should be welcome. But can I ask, will there be a report on how this money is being utilised, especially from the Tackling Poverty Coordinator? Do we see a report on how this money is being spent? Thanks.
Okay, Jackie.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. In terms of the employability money, the No One Left Behind funding is something that we've been receiving for a couple of years now. So this isn't all additional just in 25-26. There will be information on what the proposals are around how that's been funded. Alison's team pick up employability for the council. I'm sure we'll be able to provide information on how that's been spent to you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any other questions, so can we agree to note the report? Agreed. I'll come now to item 4, which is an update on the expansion of our secondary schools and future capacity issues. And Anne Donaldson is going to speak to this report. Anne.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to outline the progress on the secondary school programme for Holy Cross High School, St Andrews and St Bride's High School and Uddingston Grammar School, and to recommend an implementation plan, and to consider pupil growth, including new housing developments, in the identification of any other secondary schools potentially in need of building works. Section 3 gives the background to the paper and references the previous report to committee on the 21st of September 22, which considered the secondary school estate and future capacity issues and agreed to consider the need for expansion following assessments of capacity at a number of secondary schools. At that time, a funding bid was to be submitted to the Scottish Government's Learning Estate Investment Programme, and the paper noted that, dependent on funding, the priority would be the secondary school programme. Section 4 offers detail in relation to how the planning capacity of a school is calculated, and highlights that planning capacity differs from functional capacity, in that an element of flexibility is maintained in planning capacity to support the delivery of quality learning experiences. Paragraph 4.2 describes the elements accounted for in calculating pupil projections. Table 1 at paragraph 4.3 shows that Holy Cross High School and St Andrews and St Bride's High School are operating well above the planning capacity. It's noted that this is currently being managed on a temporary basis through creative use of all areas within the schools. However, there is a point where this will impact detrimentally on the learning and teaching experiences for pupils and staff. Paragraph 4.5 highlights that in the case of Uddingston Grammar, any pupil changes that may arise from the Newton Farm Hall side consultation won't yet impact on the school roll projections, as they won't take effect until 2030 and beyond. Section 5 considers the impact of growth of pupil numbers on each of the secondary schools in turn. Paragraphs 5.2 to 5.4 describe the position for Calderside Academy, and importantly, that due to a slowdown in housing completions within the catchment area, that the expansion is placed on hold, and that an annual review of pupil projections is undertaken. The school expansion would then be required when pupil numbers increase to the appropriate level. Paragraphs 5.5 and 5.6 describe the situation in Holy Cross High School, which, as has been mentioned, is currently operating over its planning capacity. It's proposed that internal adaptation works commence in summer 25, continuing until summer 27, with the new build extension completing spring-summer 27. Paragraph 5.7 details the position in St Andrews and St Bride's High School, which is also currently operating over planning capacity. Proposed internal adaptations would be completed for August 26, with a proposed new build extension to be completed in late 26, early 27. These developments would take planning capacity very close to forecast pupil numbers, and education resources would continue to monitor pupil numbers and housing completions, whilst evaluating further proposals to increase teaching accommodation should this be required. Para 5.8 describes the position at Uddingston Grammar. It's noted that the school site has largely been maximised in terms of internal accommodation, following additional internal adaptations. However, there is scope for a small building extension that could accommodate one technical classroom and one home economics classroom, subject to a detailed design and construction appraisal. These works would be undertaken during 2026-27 to be available for pupils in August 27. Paragraph 5.9 notes that these works would bring the overall school capacity to 1,645 pupils, and pupil roll projections are 1,650 at 2030. Pupil numbers will continue to be monitored annually and further works considered as required. Section 6 considers the remainder of the secondary school estate and a number of short to medium term emerging issues that have been identified. 6.2 describes the plans for Stonelaw High School to create 3 additional classrooms by reducing the library space. This work is included in the 25-26 capital programme. It's noted that further assessment of opportunities to increase capacity will be undertaken for implementation in future years. 6.3 highlights longer-term pressures at St John Ogilvie High School, Carluke High School and Larkhall Academy. And 6.4 confirms that all other secondary schools will continue to be monitored on an annual basis, and confirms also that no other secondary school is predicted to be significantly over capacity at this time. Financial implications in respect of capital are detailed at Section 7. It's indicated that the overall estimated budget for expansion works and adaptations at the 3 schools is identified as 18.518 million, made up of City Deal funding and developers' contributions, as indicated in Table 3 at 7.1. Paragraph 7.2 highlights that in terms of the City Deal element of the funding, the submission of a City Deal change control request is required to refine the funding across the schools, and that this includes the realignment of City Deal funding from that outlined in the original business case. Section 8 notes that in terms of implications for revenue funding, the Council has acknowledged the future revenue consequences within its medium-term financial strategy planning, and employee implications are noted in Section 9. Section 10 details the next steps and proposes that as Holy Cross and St Andrews and St Bride's are already operating beyond their planning capacity, planning and delivery of the smaller internal adaptations work is progressed. These works would be undertaken during the summer holiday periods of 25, 26 and 27. It's proposed that works at Uddingston Grammar will be developed during 2025 for implementation in 2026. 10.2 highlights that for the new build elements at Holy Cross and St Andrews and St Bride's, preparation of detailed design and tender documentation is underway and targeted to be submitted in September 25. It's noted that subject to formal approval of tenders, the construction works would be targeted to begin in early 26 and be completed in the summer of 2027. Section 11 considers the implications for climate change, sustainability and the environment, and Section 13 notes that an integrated impact assessment will be undertaken as the projects progress. And I would ask members to note that consultation has taken place with Education Resources, Community and Enterprise and Housing and Technical Resources. Turning back then to the recommendations in Section 2 on page 21, Committee is asked to approve the following recommendations. That the expansion proposals for Holy Cross High School, St Andrews and St Bride's High School and Uddingston Grammar School proceed to the detailed design and tender stage be approved, and that a City Deal change control request to refine the City Deal funding across the schools, referencing Section 7.2, be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you please indicate now? Could I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Obviously, there are some challenging issues in amongst all of this, but I wanted to ask a couple of questions relating firstly to Uddingston as it relates to Newton, and secondly as to Stonelaw High School. Uddingston, for example, even on the projections you've got here, say 1645 places after the building works, 1650 the likely capacity. That's obviously very, very tight on anybody's account there. Could you explain a bit further how the placement requests issue feeds in? Because we've got a catchment area change, placing requests. How does all this affect the Newton Farm thing? Secondly, further down, there's the relation of Stonelaw High School, which is at 6.2. Now, sorry, one other thing on it before I forget. It also talks about further building works being considered there, but equally says there's no space for further building works because of the constrained site. Could you explain what you mean by that, therefore? Secondly, on the Stonelaw High School one, the projection of after the works that are being done is 1460 with an estimate of 1577. That doesn't seem to add up. Can you give us a bit of background to how that's all going to operate through there? That's very tight after the loss of the library space as well.
Okay, Anne, do you want to pick any of that? Or Vance, right?
Thanks, Councillor. If I go to Stonelaw first of all, I don't think we said Stonelaw was tight for space. It's Uddingston that's tight for space. There's a small area out the back of Stonelaw which near the football pitches.
No, I wasn't saying that. What I was saying is that the figures for Stonelaw, 1460 after the works as opposed to estimate of 1577. What's the kind of plan for that, if I can put it that way? This is at 6.2.
Okay, apologies.
So the estimate is 1577, the planning capacity is 1560. But what we've said is further assessment will be undertaken for implementation in future years. Do you see that? Have you got that in your paper?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. All right, yeah, okay. The implementation of the library works, which will create 3 classrooms, is just the first phase of it. We have got a number of other options, both internal and external, which we would review over the following years to see which is the best and most cost-effective option to expand if required. Apologies for that.
Okay. Well,
Sorry, could you mind me to
Placing requests at Uddingston, how that works.
placing requests at Uddingston? At the present time, they have a significant number of placing requests from out with the authority. And I think that's, as we monitor the position as we go on, there's very, very little scope now to expand Uddingston Grammar, either externally or internally through adaptations, apart from that's mentioned in the report. So in the future, as we review the capacity numbers, I think we would have to look at those placing requests from out with the authority. I think there's something in the region of over 100 at the moment, which would significant, if we could deal with those issues, that would help to reduce the numbers there.
Yeah. The further point I was asking though was at 5.9 where it talked about further works we consider. Given what you said about the lack of capacity, what are you actually talking about there?
In between the two of the wings at Uddingston, there is scope for a small expansion in that area, which I think we mentioned a technical classroom and a HE classroom. That's what the school have identified as where their priority lies in those two departments, because that's where they have a sort of choke at the moment. So there's essentially there's options there for a 2-classroom extension, but after that, scope is very limited.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Norman Ray?
Thank you, Chair. My question's around Table 3 on page 25 in terms of the financing of these developments. And in particular, the split between the funding from the city deal and developer contributions. Now, my sort of understanding, and maybe it was a misunderstanding, was that when we get developer contributions, the idea is that they will cover the cost of the implications of that development, including in terms of education capacity. And therefore, I was wondering why the developer contributions make up such a relatively small part of the overall cost. Why is there not more funding from developer contributions if it's developments that are causing the greater numbers of pupils? So any explanation around that, please? Thanks.
Okay, Jackie, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Ray. In terms of the funding package for these particular schools, this is something that has been an integral part of the city deal package. So that is funding that is available to help us deliver the implications of community growth areas. So that's why there's city deal funding for this. In terms of developer contributions, you're correct, there are contributions that are made from developments across areas to contribute towards the cost of expansion. On this occasion, because we have a mix of funding, both of those pots of money can come together to deliver the works. There are other developer contributions from sites that do contribute towards other costs that are as a result of areas. So the developer contributions calculation is, as you're correct, it does contribution towards additional costs. However, we have City Deal as well that helps pay for that too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And could I come to Alec Allison?
And finance as well, but a slightly different angle. The PPIs, my understanding from the papers and where we are, PPIs, the school has been provided and we pay, can I call it a lease charge each year. From the papers, I am assuming that we are paying for these adaptions ourselves. So what does that, how does that affect our contract? Are we then responsible for the maintenance of this part of the school, which seems to be confusing the issue? Basically, how does it work?
Yeah. So you're correct, this is a PPP schools, our secondary schools are under that PPP contract. As part of the financial implications, we have reflected the fact that our unitary charge, our annual payment to the contractor, the provider will increase every year because it is part of that PPP contract. And that's for them to provide the hard facilities management costs that are associated with running that new part of the school. We are paying for the works, and that is what we have to do because this is our expansion, but there are going to be costs associated with that contract increasing, as well as increased costs for things like utilities that we would obviously have to pay for as well.
Sorry, just on the maintenance of the bit that we are now paying for, does that become part of the contract rather than the running of it? How do you decide whether a joint wall, who pays for it if there's damage?
My understanding is that the way that the contract's running just now in terms of the responsibilities for maintenance and for facilities management will continue. It's just a bigger site that is now under that contract.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and can I come to Margaret Walker?
Chair, it's just to kind of reiterate Norman's point. I think he makes an excellent point there. I mean, I think we can clearly see how the money's made up in terms of city deal and development contributions. I think, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, the point he's making is it's not enough, which reflects the whole context in terms of developers' community contributions. When you look at the overall picture, in terms of the house building programme. So, I mean, I think we're clear in how it's made up, but it's not enough. So, I mean, I suppose the question is, you know, how are we making sure we get contributions for developers that are adequate in terms of the overall profit that they're making and also address these issues in terms of the implications of the development across, you know, a number of areas, including, you know, adaptations to schools, impact in play areas, health services, all of the rest of it. And was that not supposed to be part of this new planning legislation that we keep hearing about, but we never actually kind of get a presentation on? So I hope I've not misspoke Norman's point, but I thought it was an excellent point, which wasn't really captured in the response. Thanks.
Paul?
Well, listen, thanks for the question, Councillor Walker. This goes back to the heart of the city deal, right? That originates more than 10 years ago, but, you know, between 10 and 12 years ago. And obviously the council had a number of projects that it went forward with, but one of them was community growth areas. So part of what we asked for was money that would enable development to happen. Now, cutting a long story short, development wouldn't have happened in the areas that it has to the extent that it has if it hadn't been for that money, because it wouldn't have been economical for developers to be able to put those amounts of money in to expand the school capacity in the way that had to be done, right, in order for the houses to be able to be built. So there's a special case around City Deal, right, and that money coming from the UK and from the Scottish governments went towards that as a project to enable development. But you're absolutely right in terms of you know, the point that you're making in a broader sense and longer term about being able to seek money back from developers. But this is a special case and it originates a period of time ago. So hopefully that helps, and I'm happy to pick that up with anybody out with the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the questions, and thanks to the officials for the work they put into the report. I don't have a question. I suppose the point that I would make is one that I've been very conscious of over the past few weeks, which is just in the context of the housing emergency and the fact that in this country we seem to secure new units of social housing on the back of private developments. And we have secured a number of new units of social housing through those community growth areas. But there are constraints. Obviously, education capacity constraints have to come into the equation, as well as the other constraints that, you know, developers would face, and how you basically subsidise and pump prime sites for development. They are difficult issues that the council and the city region have grappled with over the past few years. And the point that I would make, and it's a point to reflect on, it'll be a point for future councils to reflect on, is a city deal, or at least phase one of that city deal funding, comes to an end. The demand for affordable housing isn't going away, and we really do need to think about how we incentivise the kind of development that is going to allow us to meet housing need in this country and in this part of in this part of Scotland. Okay, can I come back to the recommendations? There's no other questions. Can I ask us to agree the report? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 5, which is on the Climate Emergency Fund, and I'm going to ask Alison Brown to speak to this report.
Thank you and good morning. This report provides an update on the recently announced Climate Emergency Fund for 25-26 and it seeks approval for proposed spend. As part of the budget, the Scottish Government allocated £40 million for climate emergency funding, of which the Council's allocation is just under £2.2 million. The fund seeks to scale up existing projects such as renewable energy, public transport and active travel. Projects must also be delivered by the end of March 2026. Working across resources, the projects set out in Section 4 have been identified for funding, which includes both physical work such as Clyde Walkway repairs, country park improvements and solar panel installations, as well as feasibility studies exploring heat network opportunities. And with that, I'd return to the recommendation and ask that committee approves the spend profile for the Climate Emergency Fund for 25-26.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions? And can I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. Very welcome funding, and thanks to the officers for pulling together a list in the short time scale. Obviously, we've only got a year to spend, so it's a good list of projects. But maybe there's a couple of points to make. We do need long-term funding for these issues, and I hope that continues by the Scottish Government. And because we've got a journey to make and a big investment to make, so that's the kind of first point. I do like all the projects have highlighted the co-benefits, and I think that's important for members to realise the multiple benefits that climate action can bring. A couple of points for clarification. On the composters, I think I've had clarification that the composters, people will be allowed to put food and vegetable waste in their composters because we'd want people to compost as close to home as possible to deal with their waste. And finally, noting the range of feasibility studies, and if this is one-off funding, can we ensure that the renewable heat incentive payments that are secured at last year's executive available on an annual basis remain available to fund future feasibility studies so that we can get that pipeline of technical reports to make sure we're set up for future funding. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know who wants to pick up that point. I mean, there's a point there maybe for Alison, and I don't know if that last point, if anybody else wants to pick up. But Alison, I'll come back to yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Robb. Yes, the composters, you're correct. The composters will be able to use vegetable waste as well, just not cooked or raw food. So hopefully that clarifies that point.
Okay, and just on the point about the budget there, Jackie?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of longer term funding, obviously you've made the point this is one-off from the Scottish Government, and we will be keeping our close eye to see what other funding is coming through. In terms of these feasibility projects and the outcome from those, obviously we will be looking to maximise any external funding and obviously keep an awareness of what's coming through. But at the moment, this is only one-off funding. Thanks.
Okay, and could Kirsten, do you want to come back at that?
And it's just to clarify that the renewable heat incentive payments, which come on an annual basis, can be used for feasibility studies moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, that has been confirmed. Okay. Can I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair. I'd also very much like to welcome this report and the funding coming via the Scottish Government. It's crucial that we do invest in tackling the climate emergency, so it's always welcome to see funding coming through towards that. Would agree in terms of long-term funding, but in terms of this report specifically, it's very good to welcome. It would have been good, however, to have additional funding into this area allocated through the budget process as outlined in our group's proposals, but unfortunately other groups voted against that. But generally to welcome any sort of investment into tackling the climate emergency.
Okay, can I come back to the report? And I will say thank you to the Council for rejecting the SNP amendment that would have increased our budget gap next year by £6.1 million. But in terms of the report here, I just want to commend our officials, I think, for making sure that when funds like this become available, we've actually got a good spread of projects that we can put before them. And I know this is very small in the grand scheme of things, the £2.198 million that's in front of us, but that £20,000 for the school uniform recycling pilot, I think I just want to acknowledge that through the work the Community Planning Partnership has been doing, engaging with young people in South Lanarkshire schools, this is one of the projects that's come forward from members of our youth council that they were keen to see rolled out, and it's really and Youth Forum is mentioned in the narrative around that particular item. So it's really, from my point of view, welcome to see that reflected in the report and some funding behind that project. A very modest amount of funding, but hopefully a modest amount of funding that makes a big difference. Are there any other questions on the report? There are none. Can I ask us to agree the recommendations? We're agreed. I'll come now to item 6, which is on delivering and enabling commercial space. And Alison, we're still with you for this report.
Thank you. This paper advises Committee on Glasgow City Region Delivering Enabling Space Programme and seeks approval for submission to the programme and next steps. GCR Cabinet agreed in February 2024 that monies previously allocated to improve connectivity to Glasgow Airport should be reallocated to a new regional project of scale. As a result, member authorities were invited to submit expressions of interest, with the Enabling Business Space project being ranked highest. The objectives of this programme are set out in paragraph 4.2 and very much align with the work this council has been undertaking with Ryden to better understand our land and property market. The programme will allow managing authorities to address market failure and create new commercial space. Each managing authority was asked to identify a long list of projects, and those are set out in Appendix 1. This allowed the strategic business case to be developed, which was approved by Glasgow City Region Cabinet in February of this year. The Council's allocation of funding is £11.1 million, with projects having to be delivered by 2030. The Council is now required to identify projects from the long list to be taken forward to the full business case. 3 projects are proposed to be taken forward as set out in Table 1, and these are the erection of 2 industrial units at Cathcart Road in Rutherglen, which has also secured Regeneration Capital Grant funding, and the erection of office and lab space at Shawfield. This would be a joint project with Clyde Gateway and Scottish Enterprise, supporting 3,700 square metres of commercial space and potentially supporting 244 jobs. And also the retrofit of an existing industrial unit in East Kilbride. Further details of each of those projects are set out in Section 7. Subject to committee approval, these projects will be submitted to Glasgow City Region for approval and then will move through to full business case, which will be subject to future approval by this committee and also by GCR Cabinet. Moving back to the recommendation, committee is asked to approve the Council's priority projects as set out in Table 1 and any actions required to ensure the investment within the timescales and other criteria as set out by the programme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions on this report? And can I come to Robert Brown?
It's not so much a question, just a comment, Chair. I mean, this is, to some extent, a dry report, if you like, but it's hugely important, and it bears out, I think, the work that's been done by Alison and her section in terms of identifying the needs here. It's also been reflected by the conversations we've had with local businesses of one sort or another about the very considerable lack of adequate development space of this kind going forward. So the actual delivery of projects like this at Cathcart Road and at Red Tree Labs in Shawfield I think is hugely important as part of the Council's strategy to support economic development in the area.
No, thank you. And I would echo that comment. We've got something to build from here. We know there is demand for industrial space in South Lanarkshire, but we know we don't have enough of the right type of industrial space. And hopefully what we see here is a project that will start to change the commercial estate and break down some barriers to investment in the area. And can I come now to Margaret Walker?
Yeah, it's just a question. I mean, I see the funding package is made up from a range of different partners. So I assume the specific area is not restricted to just the Clyde Gateway catchment area. But what I was going to ask was, in terms of the industrial unit upgrade and retrofit, 9.63, how will that be decided? Will there be a kind of range of different site visits or consultations with people? How will it be decided which specific areas that's going to be taken forward in?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Picking up on your first point, the money was available to the whole of South Lanarkshire, and on the long list of projects you can hopefully see that we identified sites across the patch. The short list was very much around the deliverability of projects, so we have to have spent the money and those buildings being operated by 2030. So it was where projects were furthest along that development pipeline that took us through that decision making. Coming to your second point around the retrofit, we have already done a feasibility piece of work around a building in Peel Park in East Kilbride, and that is very much a potential demonstrator project of how you can retrofit industrial buildings that are becoming obsolete. Again, going back to the Ryden report, it highlighted that as a council area we have significant amount of properties moving into that obsolete area, and therefore we need to try and understand the technologies, how much it costs, the running costs, etc. So at the moment we're very much looking at a building in Peel Park.
Yeah. So there wouldn't be an opportunity, for example, for a local council or a community council to come forward and say, we have a space here that we'd like you to look at in terms of a feasibility study or whatever?
I'm happy if there is a building that you're aware of that's council owned, that we could have a conversation around that, whether it sits within this project or whether it sits within the wider feasibility budgets and going back to sort of climate change monies as well. We can potentially have a look at it, but I'm happy to have a conversation offline with you.
Okay, that's good, thanks.
I think the key point for me is that that particular project, it's a substantial amount of money, £1 million, a potential site identified in Peel Park, but the idea there is that it's a demonstrator. The idea there is we're trying to incentivise some wider change in the commercial estate and portfolio across South Lanarkshire. And I would hope with the opportunity to come back and seek sort of further funding in future. But if there are no other questions, can I draw us back to the recommendations? And can we agree the report? We're agreed. Thank you. Can I come now to item 7, which is on the Council Workforce Strategy and Plan, and Michelle Milne is going to speak to this report. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides the Executive Committee with an update on the Council Workforce Strategy and the Council and Resource Workforce Plans. You'll see it's section 3 and be familiar with the process around workforce planning and developing a strategy in the Council. It provides a framework for us in terms of that workforce planning process. The strategy and plans are aligned to current and future Council service needs, and it details the approach by the Council to ensure that the workforce required for going forward is going to be in place to meet those needs. At section 3.2, you will also see in June 24, Audit Scotland published the best value thematic work in South Lanarkshire, and there were key actions highlighted within that report, which were to produce an updated workforce strategy with accompanying workforce plans by March 25, and that the revisions in the plan should reflect alignments to the Council plan and links to other Council initiatives and strategies, including digital transformation and inclusion. Section 3.3 details the work that's been going since October 24, which has really been about the HR teams collaborating with the resources in terms of the preparation and development of the plans. Section 4 sets out the workforce planning framework, and you'll see that the workforce strategy is attached to Appendix 1, and the key strategic actions detailed within that are building workforce capacity through a strategic data-driven approach to workforce planning, recruitment, attraction, and retention of a diverse workforce through the recruitment strategy, learning development strategy and succession planning, Use of the workforce planning to ensure there is a skilled workforce available to deliver key council strategies such as digital and climate change, for example. And also it's about supporting employee health and wellbeing with a strategic approach to managing absence and ensuring employee supports increase our employee resilience. I've also mentioned that we are covering, it's detailed at 4.2 as well, just in terms of links to the Audit Scotland Best Value thematic work. The strategy as well, section 4.3, within that it contains a national context which we have to be very alert to and keep in touch with, as well as local drivers in terms of local needs and services, and what the makeup of our workforce is in terms of our experiences. And it's about looking at those challenges and gaps in terms of our workforce. Section 4.4, you'll see across the council, which is similar to other councils and other organisations, recruitment challenges and absence levels continue to impact on workforce availability in terms of delivery of service. That's certainly key in the strategy going forward and ongoing work that's happening within personnel services and across the council in terms of reviewing our approach to maximising attendance in terms of that vision, is it meeting our needs, and in terms of us updating our recruitment strategy, which has taken place this year as well. In terms of the council workforce strategy, it aligns to the council plan for 25 to 27. It does focus on recruitment and retention, absence management, digital and climate readiness, and employee wellbeing. You'll see within section 5, we have tried to flag the kind of key information that's came from the resources in terms of contributing to developing the council plan, which is at a higher level, and the workforce strategy. And within that, you'll see, for example, in community and enterprise, they're looking at the recruitment challenges they have, and a lot more collaboration with the FE sector, just in terms of the availability of courses, etc., and some of our key posts and how we maximise that, both locally and working with other local authorities. In education, it's certainly a busy time in terms of reform and our readiness for that, in terms of digital skills, potential teacher number increases and or decreases in certain areas, because you're trying to cater for that in the future. Within finance and corporate, we're flagging an ageing workforce, particularly because IT sits within that and is responsive to the full council, digital transformation. Housing and technical resources, a response around homelessness, and whilst there's an example there in terms of grow your own initiatives, we do that in other areas across the council as well. And in social work, again, similar to other areas across the council, we're recruiting in rural areas, looking at career pathways and looking at the work that takes place through the Care Academy. In terms of next steps, this is to approve the strategy and plan as per the recommendations today, which I will come back to. And the resource individual workforce plans will be presented to resource committees after the summer recess. And just again to say that the council plan, which is based on the council strategy, is attached to Appendix 2. And the key challenges that we have identified within that are around recruitment and retention, transformation, that's business transformation, it's digital transformation, it's anything that's happening in those areas. Then as a consequence, any skilled gaps that have been identified through that, and the key focus on delivering our workforce strategy, our learning and development strategy, etc., alongside council strategy and other strategies such as digital and climate strategy, and focusing on employee health and wellbeing. So in terms of the actions we're taking to address those challenges, it's about recruitment practices to widen as much as possible our candidate pool in terms of job roles, and also to look internally at any initiatives that we can take in terms of growing our own staff and making opportunities available internally. Employee development, and I suppose how we promote the council in terms of attracting and retaining employees, and the pathways that we have within the council. We also need to be mindful of succession planning and continuing in terms of management and leadership development, and supporting that transformation and change management. The one thing that is consistent at this minute in time is change. It's there and it's constant. And we want to make sure that we are enhancing wellbeing and maximising attendance. It's also important as well that these plans are monitored by resource management teams, and there will be annual updates to committee on these plans going forward. And I'd like to refer committee back to section 2 within the report in terms of the following recommendations: to note the contents of the report, that the Council Workforce Strategy and Workforce Plan are approved, and that the update on resource workforce plans, which is in summary within the report, and that they're coming back to committees after summer recess per resource, be approved as well and noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I mean, the report is very hot on the challenges. I think we're aware of the difficulties there are in this area of recruitment. Really, from every sort of employee, I think, has got challenges from professional posts to community enterprise posts right across the board. But I wonder if there's enough emphasis on two potentials within this. One is growing our own workforce, which I know is touched on, but I just wonder if it needs a bit more of a focus as we go to the individual resource plans to make the opportunities there available. All sorts of things to do with links with schools and things like that as well. But also the other end of the coin, which we've touched on in other reports, which is the kind of growing number of people who are coming out of school with difficulties in placements and things of that kind. I just wonder if there's a greater need to put focus on what we can do to link those two issues, if I can put it that way, in the detailed development of these plans.
Yes, no, thank you very much for the question. It's certainly considerations that we have had and you will all be aware of. We have been for a number of years doing a lot of work around Grow Your Own, and we have linked into the work taking place in education and through the work in our employability teams. And actually, I'm meeting Douglas again this week, so we are regularly doing that, but particularly having a focus on what we need as a council, but what the supports that are needed, particularly around that second point that you made in terms of difficulties, school, creating placements, creating the correct environment where young people or new people starting in the council, they're going to stay, they're going to be successful in staying in those roles, and we're going to be able to retain them. And I know that the employability promise was at the last exec in March as well, so we are very aware of that in terms of those linkages as well as with our own learning and development strategy for our own staff. So in terms of that, there is much more detail in the resource plans specifically, and I suppose uniquely. There'll be common areas across all resources, and then there needs to be tailored areas depending on the type of posts in those resources. So you'll see much more detail coming through and those linkages that you're referring to, because they're really, really important.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thanks for the report, Michelle. Really thorough and great to see it more aligning with the council plan as well. I've got a few points to make. I'm happy to go back to any of them if you need it as well. On community and enterprise resources, we see the challenges of recruiting and retaining workers, particularly those on seasonal contracts. I was going to ask what changes are taking place to respond to this, and will these be included in the grounds review terms of reference that will be coming up soon, I hope. So that's the first point. Do you want me to stop in between or take them all? Take them all, okay. And related to grounds as well, in Appendix 2, page 72, on the climate training side, can we also add in biodiversity training? This is all actually in the Climate Strategy Action Plan for this year. It was also mentioned in the Nature Emergency motion, which we're working on a response on. So just for completeness and to reflect the motion and the Climate Action Plan for this year. Also mentioned in the Nature Emergency motion is the Forestry and Outdoor Learning Award, which I'm hoping to get a response from education on. That could help grow our own in terms of getting more young people involved in grounds and outdoor activities and so on, and all these trees that need planted with our Clyde Climate Forest. I think that would be an excellent link in. So hopefully pick up on all of these things related to the workforce planning. The last point is in October 2022, the Council signed a volunteering pledge which included increasing the number and diversity of voluntary opportunities across all sections of the organisation. Can I ask if this is included in the workforce strategy, or how this is being taken forward, given the health and wellbeing benefits and learning benefits that volunteering can bring? And if not, can we ask for report how that is going in terms of our responsibilities to fulfil that volunteering excuse me, pledge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kirsten, Michelle, do you want to pick those points up?
Thank you. I'll ask in a minute if you want to update on some of the work in terms of the terms of reference and community and enterprise resources. What I would say around recruitment in general, whether it be seasonal contracts in terms of grounds, is a really good example. We've been in close discussions with the head of service on that. We look at each recruitment campaign that we do, because the workforce changes that is incoming as well as the work that we need people to do. We're looking at the type of contracts that we offer, we get feedback, we look at the success rate and the conversion rate. So do you get 200 applicants but you can only appoint 2, or do you get 200 and you can appoint 60? So we're constantly analysing that, and actually we're in discussions with Head of Service just now in terms of is there any other additional improvements that we can make to that in terms of going forward. I'll come back to you at the end in terms of when I've answered other questions in terms of community and enterprise. I want to add anything else into that in terms of the terms of reference. It's an easy fix. We can add biodiversity training into that. There'll be much more detail, and it might be in the resource plan. We pick up some of those outputs from the discussions with education just around the forestry element that you had mentioned, in terms of anything that we can pick up there, just in terms of adding that into the report if we need to, but we can certainly add that into this report. That's not a problem at all. In terms of volunteering, I'm going to come and invite Alison in just to in some of the work that's been happening around climate change and sustainability around volunteering. Within the council, we are supportive. We work with trade union colleagues. We're obviously focused on paid employment and paid roles. We do have volunteering opportunities that take place across resources, but probably flagging is probably a good opportunity to provide an update in the future, just in terms of how that pledge is going and some of the activity that's taking place across the council, so we can certainly pick that up.
Okay. David, Alison. David?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor Rob. I just wanted to pick up in terms of the seasonal employees. It is difficult, and this isn't specific to South Lanarkshire, just across the sector in terms of employing seasonal employees, because you're relying on people who are prepared to only come in for a short period of time and work for you. That remains a challenge, and always has been a bit of a challenge of getting seasonal employees on board. I'm pleased to say that it's much easier to appoint more permanent employees, and we're increasing the number of permanent employees that we've got around ground maintenance to help to work on things like frontline first. So we're trying to focus on that, increasing the number of permanent employees we've got, whilst also still retaining an element of seasonal employees and keeping them on as long as possible, and kind of continue to provide them with work. And then from those seasonal employees often come our permanent employees in the future as well. So we're doing a lot of work on that activity, and again, that's not just across grounds but across all areas to try and recruit people into the workforce as best we can. Thank you.
Okay, and Alison.
Thank you. And just picking up the last point around volunteering, the Climate Change and Sustainability team did do some volunteering last year. We did some woodland management in a park in Cambuslang, which was hugely successful, if not somewhat sore in the arms. We are looking to roll that out across my service this year and provide opportunities for others around the sort of green agenda, but also around sort of well-being of staff. And happy to provide any further information on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come now to a question from David Shearer?
Thank you, Chair. A very comprehensive report, but one of the issues highlighted is we have a number of members of staff that are coming towards the end of a very successful career. Is there anything in the strategy, or is there anything within the departments being planned on how do we capture that 30 years plus experience before we lose that key individual? It's fine to have a strategy to employ new people, but there are many, many times where you cannot buy 30 years experience even if you hire the best of candidates. Is there any strategy in how we capture that experience? Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, do you want to pick that up and maybe succession planning?
Right, it's very difficult. I think it's not something that's new, just in terms of agent workforce. Certainly in my experience since 2003 in the council, there tends to be waves of departures in the council, just in terms of the age profile of the council. So we are acutely aware. As part of our learning and development strategy, which we're just refining just now, we are very acutely aware about refreshing our induction, our management development activity, but we've got managers involved in all of that. We have other activities such as mentoring and coaching that takes place in the council, as well as kind of grow your own. I think we've got a good structure in terms of committee reports, history within the council, learning. But you're right, there is some things in people's heads, just in terms of that history of the organisation. So whilst we do all of that and we look at PDRs, we look at appraisals, we certainly promote through that kind of grow your own, the sharing of information and understanding in terms of how we got to where we got to. But we can't always capture all of that, but we certainly have initiatives in place to try to do our best in terms of maximising that. What is also helpful is when you have notice of that, when somebody gives you notice that they're going to be leaving the organisation, can be a bit of a flurry, just in terms of trying to capture those kind of key things, do handovers, just in terms of either new people coming in or people who are picking up that work. So we're very aware of that, and we've got kind of corporate initiatives around that, and then there's specific steps that probably people take locally, just in terms of trying to capture that before someone leaves the building. But it's very difficult to do because there's a lot of experience in somebody who is leaving after 30, 35, 40 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Just in terms of the conversations we've just had, I appreciate, so most of those kind of detailed points that probably Councillor Brown and Councillor Robb were raising, I think we could expect to see more of in the resource plans, but there was one point there which we just, if the committee are content, we just want to include that point around biodiversity training. We can adopt that just now. So with that addition, are the committee happy to agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 8, which is the Council's Youth Champion and Representative on the Regen FX Trust, and can I ask Ian Strachan to speak to this item? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Morning, Committee. It's a report seeking approval from the Committee to replace Councillor Buchanan as the Council's Youth Champion and Representative on the board of Regen FX. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Could I come to John Ross?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I must admit, when I saw this item appear on the agenda, I was quite concerned simply because the positions in question were initially put in at the first meeting of the Council. However, I sought clarity from Ian and was advised that this was proper and in keeping with our Code of Conduct and standards. However, I'm still a wee bit concerned that the report comes forward as an officer's report rather than just asking for nominations for these two positions. And I just wonder why that was in the first way that we thought of bringing this forward. Secondly, as these positions are open to anyone in the committee to put forward nominations, the SNP group would like to put forward Ross Clark as our nomination for both of these positions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Right. Well, first of all, these have been taken forward in the normal way. You'll be familiar with the changes that have already taken place. With Councillor Keep being the interim chair of the Education Committee, and it's normal in the course of the work of the Council that political groups who have particular positions just would regularly update their membership. There's nothing unusual about that. and that's why the report has come forward in the normal way that it usually would. I will move the report as is, and if you wish to move an amendment, do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do.
David Shearer. Then the motion will be the report as is, and the amendment is that Councillor Clark would be put forward in place of Councillor Buchanan. So could I ask you to vote? Sorry,
Second the motion.
Councillor Devlin seconded the motion. So you have an option. Motion will be Councillor Buchanan, and the amendment is Councillor Clark.
Just as the Chair described, I'll just now bring up the vote for you to choose your option.
I've not got an option to vote.
If you hit enter meeting, that's you.
If you press enter meeting,
We're still waiting on a couple of members voting.
have we got full attendance?
Okay, we've got full, all the members have now voted. I'll stop the vote. Okay, I confirm that 17 members have voted for the motion, 9 members have voted for the amendment, and we have 1 abstention, so the motion is declared carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll come now to the next item, which is community wealth building legislation, a call for views in terms of the consultation that's ongoing there, and Jackie Taylor is going to speak to this item. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is to provide committee with a draft of a response to the Scottish Parliament's call for views on the Community Wealth Building Bill. It is the Scottish Parliament's Economy and Fair Work Committee that is conducting the Stage 1 scrutiny of the bill, and the proposed response is attached to Appendix 1 for your information. In terms of a bit of background behind the bill, it's provided at Section 4 of the report on page 109. The bill is making provision for community wealth building in 3 ways. It's placing a duty on Scottish ministers to produce and publish a community wealth building statement. It's requiring local authorities acting with certain public bodies within the local authority area to produce community wealth building action plans. And it's also placing a duty on Scottish ministers to produce guidance in relation to the production of action plans and the inclusion of community wealth building measures in strategic planning by public bodies. The call for review was issued on the 4th of April, and the deadline for submission was the 23rd of May. However, we have been granted an extension to allow Executive Committee to consider our response back. The committee has asked for views around a number of areas, and they're summarised at section 5.2. These include whether we believe that the bill will achieve the objective to ensure consistent implementation of community wealth building across Scotland, asking if there is a need to change the law around here, and also asking if extra duties that will be placed on some public sector organisations are proportionate, and whether we agree that the list of relevant public bodies that are proposed within the bill is correct or not. And as I mentioned, our draft response is attached to Appendix 1 for your consideration. There's been a contribution towards this from across departments within the council, and it does draw on the experience that we have had in terms of our community wealth building strategy that we've had for the last 4 years. I wouldn't propose to go into the appendix in any great detail, but you can see in terms of the responses that we have made, there are some points that we are highlighting that we do believe that the bill does have the potential to improve community wealth building activity across Scotland. It will require public bodies to implement action plans, and that will provide stimulus to partnership elements of community wealth building. In terms of the Scottish Ministers and their requirement to publish statements on community wealth building, as well as guidance and direction, again, that should provide clarity and a focus around the community wealth building agenda. We are saying that the duty needs to be enabling rather than creating additional layers of bureaucracy. And we do support a change in the law, but have proposed other non-legislative measures, and they're detailed at page 113 and 114 on how the community wealth building agenda can be taken forward. We are making the point at the top of page 115 around the financial memorandum that accompanies the bill, and we are suggesting that if there is additional resource, by that I mean money required for local authorities and other bodies to deliver any asks of legislation, that is provided. We do agree with the list of relevant public bodies that are proposed within the bill, and they're detailed on page 115 and 116 of the response. And we also have provided some other proposals from page 117 onwards, where there could be other ways of facilitating community wealth building across the individual pillars that we include within our community wealth building strategy. So that's a summary of the response that the Council is making. I would take you back to section 2 of the report, where we are asking that the draft response be approved for submission to the Scottish Parliament. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions? And can I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thanks very much again. I've circulated some suggestions to group leaders last week. I think the report is absolutely fine. I just think it could be enhanced by picking up a couple of things on the finance and land pillars, a bit of overlap between the two. These would really make the links between renewable energy and community wealth building, and also make more of the potential for renewable energy to deliver for community wealth building as well. I'll go through each of them. Number one actually matches a submission that the Council have already made to renewable energy consultation to the Government. It's to ask again that they issue guidance on community wealth building and community benefit payments for onshore wind to start at between 8 to 10 kilowatts per megawatt per year, £8,000 to £10,000 per megawatt per year. That really reflects some of the massive profits that are making, just to rebalance that a bit for our local communities. Number two is to address some of the challenges that the planners and people on the planning committees across Scotland are actually facing, is to ask that Scottish Government issues guidance on community benefit payments from other renewables like solar farms and battery farms. And the last one is to push the boat out a wee bit and ask for new guidance for renewable energy projects to provide 10 to 20% of public or community shares in renewable energy to increase the benefits to local communities from some of these developments and keep money circulating in the local economy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution, and thank you for just providing the group leaders with advanced notice of it. I think all three of those areas are acceptable, and as you say, the first one or two, certainly the first one, is sort of appears in some consultation responses the Council's already put forward. So I'm quite content with that, but I'll allow the committee to just take the other points before we come back to that. Ross Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second that amendment if needed. We know there are issues with community benefit and communities kind of seeing that community benefit and ensuring that there is that process there. And anything we can do to try and standardise that process can only be a good thing for our communities. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Happy to take on board those points and incorporate them into the paper if the rest of the committee is so willing? Yeah? Agreed. Okay, then we've agreed the report. Can I come now to our last item, which is item 10, which is a strategic environmental assessment progress report, and I'm going to ask David Booth to speak to this item. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform Committee of the progress in carrying out strategic environmental assessments on the Council's policies, plans, programmes and strategies during the year 2024-25. Section 3 of the report describes the legislative requirement to undertake SEAs and the Council's approach to the matter, including the different stages of the SEA process, the biannual South Lanarkshire State of the Environment report and the requirement to consult with statutory authorities. Moving to Section 4 of the report, which outlines the progress in carrying out SEAs during the year 24-25. As detailed in 4.3, there have been 4 assessments of plans which were completed at the pre-screening stage, and those are contained within Table 1 of the report. I would point out to the committee there's a small typo in Table 1 and Table 2 as it says completed in 2023-24, and that should actually read 24-25, so apologies for that. Those, as I say, are detailed in Table 1. There were 3 plans which were finalised at the screening stage, and those are contained in Table 2 at the bottom of page 122. Sections 4.5 through to 4.10 describe other work that's been carried out over the last year in terms of SEAs, and this includes screenings for reports for Hamilton East Kilbride Town Centre master plans, draft scoping reports for the Local Development Plan 3, and the reports, the progress of reports for the forthcoming local transport strategy and the new Lanark World Heritage Site Management Plan. With that, I'll take committee back to recommendations in 2.1, and those recommendations are that the statutory requirements for the SEA to inform the development of council-led policies, plans, programmes and strategies be noted, and that the progress in conducting SEAs is also noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. David, can I ask if there are any questions in this report? I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll just note the report. There are no items of urgent business, so thank you for your attendance. I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.